back to the Brown Political Review podcast. These are your hosts, Becky
and Caroline.
And today we're talking about how narrative power and resistance shape the immigration climate today. Caroline will begin by unpacking how media narratives can center certain lives while overlooking the Black and Brown communities most impacted by ICE violence and deaths in detention centers, with insights from Alex Preddy and Renee Good. Then we'll hear from a volunteer with the Deportation Defense Line about grassroots organizing and what meaningful activism looks like beyond visibility. We'll also explore the blurred lines between federal immigration enforcement and local policing, and the tension between state authority and federal power. Lastly, I will reflect on the impact of collective action through May 1st, a day without immigrants, assessing the effectiveness of labor strikes and non-participation before closing with broader reflections on events shaping the immigration community today. To start off, Caroline will explore how recent ICE-related violence and deaths reveal media biases that often overlook harm against Black and Brown communities.
Two recent victims of ICE violence, Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy, were given large news coverage and highlighted by the media following their tragic deaths. Protesters in Minneapolis, along with many others across the country, took to the streets to show their outrage. During this period of anger, loss, and grief for the lives lost to ICE brutality, communities have rallied together to find hope through a time that may seem hopeless. In the midst of chaotic politics, not restricted to the realm of immigrant rights, it can be difficult for followers of current events to keep up with even the biggest of headlines. It seems, however, that there is a potential emerging pattern surrounding who is and isn't represented in the news surrounding immigrant rights advocacy. One may wonder why the names Alejandro Cabrera Clemente, Tuan Van Bui, or Jose Guadalupe Ramos Solano, all individuals among others who have died in ICE custody just this year, have not appeared next to the names of Renee Nicole Good and Alex Preddy. This could potentially be due to the heightened visibility of violence that occurs on the street, rather than that hidden in detention centers, creating greater publicity for certain acts of injustice. It is, however, still possible that underlying racist and xenophobic biases of the media and the public tend to underemphasize the loss of immigrants and people of color. 16 deaths of individuals in ICE detention centers have been publicized, yet these people have not been immortalized into public consciousness as household names. In order to fully represent and honor the lives of those lost to ICE violence, let us look to where ICE is taking and harming members of our communities. Deaths on our streets tell us that ICE is creating public violence and fear. Deaths in detention centers tell us that detained individuals are not being taken care of, given adequate medical attention or access to healthy living conditions, and are likely being met with the same violence that we have protested in relation to public deaths seen in Minneapolis. Let these indescribably terrible losses not only be remembered, but inform defenders of immigrants' rights on how to combat ICE terror. Becky had the opportunity to speak with a guest involved in grassroots Providence activism. Let's hear a little bit about what it's like on the ground in today's activism climate.
So, to start off, can you describe more what the Deportation Defense Line does, / what's its mission and what role you have in it?
So the Deportation Defense Line is, like you stated, a grassroots organization specifically within Rhode Island focused on helping community members after they are kidnapped and detained. The Deportation Defense Line essentially does outreach into community members as well as mobilizes while ICE has been spotted and after ICE has been spotted or has kidnapped a community member. It has been going on and has been especially very, very active these last few months after ICE has been going into more communities and taking people very, very forcefully and in just very high numbers. So this work has been going on previous to obviously like these last few months. Organizations like Amor and ONA have been doing this work for so incredibly long, but specifically the Deportation Defense Line focuses on gaining visibility for these community members who have been taken and are continuing to be taken from these communities all throughout Rhode Island. Specifically, what my role is going out into the Providence, specifically College Hill area courthouses, and going out and handing out flyers and flyering and letting people know that one, ICE is present in their community specifically, and 2, letting people know that we do have a petition going on for people to be able to have their court hearings in the comfort of their own home, and kind of trying to diminish the risk and possibility of them being taken outside of these courthouses, just because we have seen specifically within the deportation defense line work that people are being taken as they're going to their court hearings for a variety of different things, and as they are walking out, literally like second by second, people are being taken.
Great. So you did mention just like an overall review of what you kind of do in this organization, but specifically, what does a typical day of outreach look like to you at the courthouse?
A typical day of outreach varies, and I think specifically within my shift, I have seen that it does have a variety of outcomes, or what a quote-unquote typical day looks like. What we would hope a typical day to look like would just be, we set up outside the courthouses on the sidewalk, and we hand people 1 of 2 flyers depending on how much time they will give us, especially since we are trying to catch people in like a split-second moment as they are walking by the courthouse. And we're trying to get people to join the different channels and avenues that we have of alerts in order to mobilize for when ICE presence is spotted. And then the second flyer is, like I mentioned previously, it's for our virtual court hearings, and trying to get people to sign on and gain more visibility for that, because I think a lot of people don't know virtual court hearings are a possibility. So we're trying to gain a lot of visibility for the virtual court hearings that they can request through their attorneys, as well as trying to get it to be the default offered to just everyone within Rhode Island.
So how does specifically the hotline and the WhatsApp group chat help community members or help with active ICE activity? Can you walk us through what that process is?
So like usually what happens is we will be on outreach, and so we'll be in the middle of like flyering, and then usually someone will also be patrolling, or sometimes we have also just seen like ICE vehicles are going kind of like through the front of the courthouse, and usually like people in between flyering will notice the vehicle, and once the vehicle is spotted, someone will follow it and try to check it out and see if it fits certain criteria of what we think could be a potential ICE vehicle. So once that is seen and anyone has a suspicion, they call the hotline, and on the hotline there are verifiers who will talk you through kind of like this process of whether or not it is a ICE vehicle, and then they will have a verifier come and check. And once that vehicle has been verified, then whether it is the WhatsApp or the signal, then a mobilization text will be sent out. After that text is sent out, hopefully no one has been taken yet, so then we try to get as many people as we can to come and help us kind of like follow the vehicle and see what it is or who it is that vehicle is trying to watch. And yeah, I would say that's kind of it.
So in that regard, how do you see success or effectiveness in your outreach efforts, specifically like if an ICE kidnapping is happening actively, or if you've seen any success in just, mobilizing the community in different ways?
I would definitely say there's a variety of ways to measure, I would say, the effectiveness. We have been able to successfully get ICE to go away, whether that is by honestly letting them know that they are being watched, or following them and trying to get them to go away from the courthouse. I will also say, unfortunately, when people have been kidnapped, and another way is, I would say, to be able to connect with the families of the person who has been taken, usually whether that is if someone is with their family member and has been taken and this family member is left kind of not knowing what next steps are. We try to connect them with what potential next steps could be and try to help them figure out where their family member may have been taken to, and try to get them connected with other resources.
Because you continue to get involved in community work, how do you stay grounded and not give in to symbolic gestures?
Yeah, I think at Brown it can definitely be very hard not to give in to symbolic gestures. I think a lot of students will kind of just do a post and not really show up into community spaces, or not make it a priority to give back, especially to the Providence community, considering everything that Brown has taken from specifically Providence. And I think a lot of individuals and a lot of students obviously have a lot going on, but I think what makes it incredibly grounding for specifically this work is recognizing your presence makes a difference between whether or not someone makes it home that day. I also think a very important thing is the support professors have provided, because I definitely think if I get an alert that ICE has been spotted and, for example, it's not my outreach day and I go down to the courthouse, my professor is not gonna care whether or not I was in lecture that day if I'm letting them know the situation. And I think a lot of my professors have been very supportive of that. But yeah, I just think it's a larger cycle of Brown students continuing to fall into a very, very performative cycle of just reposting something, for example. Or I think something that really hit the larger Brown community was when an individual was taken literally down the street from List. And I remember that part really hit me because we had sent out an alert, and I know previous to that week there had been so much flyering done on the main green, and I think out of the entire student body only 2 individuals showed up. But I think especially getting to talk and seeing the child who was left once their parent had been taken, I think that kind of hit close to home, recognizing that your presence is making a difference. Again, the shifts are literally 2 hours. You definitely have 2 hours of your day that you can give up or make it work, or even if it's only for an hour, or if you join the WhatsApp or the Signal and you see an alert. Both of the courthouses which we do outreach at are not incredibly far from campus. They are at most maybe a 15-minute walk. And I think being rooted and grounded, knowing that sometimes, you may just be flyering and you may face a lot of rejection or mean comments from people that you are talking to, but recognizing that at the end of the day, you never know what can be happening, specifically your outreach shift or any other day of the week, where it does make a difference whether someone is one taken or whether that individual's family can know that their family member was taken.
You kind of mentioned this a little bit right now, but to kind of end off, what are some ways listeners can get involved with either the Deportation Defense Line or overall just any community-grounded work?
Yeah, one way people can get involved is actually show up to the trainings, or if not, I know the shift leads are very, very incredible, and they are more than willing to catch you up if you cannot give 2 hours of a Saturday throughout the semester to be involved in the training. Or also, I think anyone who is part of the defense line or part of any shift would be more than willing to catch anyone up. So whether that is dedicating some of your time, 2 hours of your time throughout the week, or just adding the WhatsApp or the Signal and showing up and mobilizing when an alert has been sent out, I definitely think that also just makes such a difference to what we can get done. Or again, signing the petition and letting other people know about it, or even showing up to events that are surrounding either the defense line or the petition or anything of similar scale.
I want to thank our guests again for an insightful interview, and now Caroline will turn to a broader question that the Deportation Defense Line's work raises: how the presence of federal agents in local spaces blur the lines between immigration enforcement and local policing.
As someone who has spoken to many immigration activists and seen firsthand the collaboration of ICE and the police in detainment operations, it appears that the public's perception of the line between different sectors of federal power is becoming more and more blurry. While the Providence police are no longer allowed to cooperate with ICE agents, these collaborative missions have been seen across the country. When ICE agents dress in similar uniforms as police officers and appear with them in joint actions, it is clear that the ability to distinguish between the two and their roles may become more and more difficult. In a time with heightened distrust of the police due to violence against Black and brown communities, cooperation in actions, often done violently, against immigrant communities is likely to have the same effect. Multiple studies show that, in the past few years, immigrants have become more avoidant of talking to the police, even if they were the victim of a crime. This has led to lower reports of crime that have impacted immigrant communities, contributing to stresses already coming from ICE violence in the larger political climate. In a world where fear is growing surrounding an agency that is, in theory, supposed to protect and help people, where does one turn to? Many have found that community organizations and advocacy groups provide some support, but the lack of confidence in institutional organizations will have lasting effects on how generations of individuals perceive, interact with, and get help from said organizations. Continuing to focus on the implications of the current state of federal immigration enforcement powers and the responses from immigrant communities, Becky will dive into the influence of May 1st demonstrations and what their significance means for the future.
As much as we have talked about the importance of grassroots organizing, there is still a need for large demonstrations. On May 1st, 2006, a coalition of immigration advocacy organizations and labor unions prompted a nationwide protest in response to the 2005 Congress bill that strengthened border control and restricted immigrant and undocumented persons' rights. This protest, most notably known as A Day Without an Immigrant or the Great American Boycott, was deliberately held on May Day, International Workers' Day. Organizers called on people to abstain from buying, selling, working, and attending school to demonstrate just how essential immigrant labor is to the U.S. economy. Large protests broke out nationally, with Los Angeles seeing the largest turnout, between 1 to 2 million people. Economic disruptions followed. Companies like Tyson Foods closed or suspended operations, Goya Foods paused deliveries, and restaurants, farms, and construction sites across the country slowed or shut down. What made this moment powerful wasn't just the scale of the protests, it was the strategy behind them. Economic and labor strikes have long been tools for marginalized communities to assert power in systems that are often excluding them from formal political influence. When workers withdraw their labor, they expose how much the economy depends on them. It forces industries, policymakers, and the public to confront a reality that is often invisible: the essential nature of immigrant labor in agriculture, service work, manufacturing, and beyond. We've seen this strategy work historically. During the Delano grape strike, farm workers organized under leaders like Dolores Huerta used boycotts and strikes to win labor contracts and improve working conditions. More broadly, labor action throughout history, from early industrial strikes to modern-day walkouts, have led to tangible changes like wage increases, workplace protection, and shifts in public policy. A Day Without an Immigrant followed that same logic. By stepping away from work, school, and consumption, participants created a visible absence, one that translated into economic pressure. This kind of disruption is difficult to ignore. Businesses lose revenue, supply chains are interrupted, and local economies feel the impact almost immediately. And while one day alone may not produce sweeping legislative change, it builds momentum. It raises public awareness, strengthens solidarity amongst participants, and signals to those in power that there is both unity and willingness to act collectively. At the same time, it's important to recognize that participating in these strikes often comes with risks. Many immigrants, especially undocumented workers, face potential job loss, retaliation, or legal consequences. That reality makes their participation even more significant. It underscores the urgency of the issues at hand and the depth of commitment within these communities. Ultimately, large-scale demonstrations like A Day Without an Immigrant complement grassroots organizing rather than replace it. Grassroots efforts builds the foundation, educating communities, creating networks, and sustaining long-term advocacy, while mass protests and economic strikes amplify that work on a national stage. Together, they form a dual strategy, one that is both sustained and visible, both local and collective. And that's the key takeaway. Change doesn't come from a single tactic. It comes from the intersection of many. When people organize at the grassroots level and also mobilize in large strategic demonstrations, they don't just make noise, they create pressure.
And historically, pressure is what has forced systems to listen. And as May Day approaches, remember, if you can participate in any way, please do, as a way to support our fellow community members.
Thank you for listening to the Brown Political Review podcast. This podcast is produced by the Brown Political Review, directed by Guilherme Sequeira, Tiziano Pardo, Will Thomas, and Michael Shui. The multimedia board is directed by Clara Bassinger-Rosen, Liad Zavriev, and Caroline Cordts. Our awesome team is made up of Xavier Colin, Caroline Cordts, Benjamin Daniel, Thomas Foley, Becky Montes, Aaron Ozierek, and Isabella Pietkowski. We hope you tune in again soon. Caroline and Becky, signing off.